Welcome, everyone. We are here at the third annual Connecticut Conference on Climate Change and Insurance. My name is Brian Garcia. I'm President and CEO of the Connecticut Green Bank, and will be helping moderate today's panel on empowering communities with state grants for resilience. We have a great panel assembled for you here today. I'm going to ask them in a second to introduce themselves and to talk about the research projects that they're working on. But first, I wanted to set some context for this panel. All of the states that we're going to be hearing from today have been provided with support from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. This is one of the largest foundations in America focused on health equity. It uses policy, grants, and impact investment towards the goal of every American having the opportunity to live the healthiest life possible. They are specifically working with the National Association of Insurance Commissioners and providing grant funding to the Center for Insurance Policy and research there, and are directly supporting projects in the states that we're going to be talking to here today to examine barriers keeping insurers from bringing their best capital to community development. How climate change solutions will make communities more resilient and healthier. And we're going to hear from our panelists here in a second on how they're using their research dollars to advance how they're addressing their communities and making them more resilient to the impacts of climate change here in a second. The focus of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, their goal is to match insurance company capital with these opportunities that we're talking about to drive increased investment flows for purposes such as affordable housing, economic development, and climate resilience. What are all the different tools that a foundation like the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation can use from grants, investments, support for policies to advance resilience in our most vulnerable communities? So with that as the context, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves, talk about their organizations, their roles, and tell us a little bit about why climate change, public health, and insurance are important to them. So Vince, why don't you give us an introduction of yourself, your organization, and tell us why climate change, public health, and insurance are important to you.
My name is Vince Blymel. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Communications and Outreach at the Colorado Division of Insurance. Climate change is something that we are very interested in. It's impacting us here in Colorado and the western states. Wildfires are not new to this area, but what we are seeing is they are increasing in frequency and in strength and in the time of year that they happen. We used to have a wildfire season, and now it seems to be year-round. It's concerning. It's going to have an impact, obviously, on homeowners insurance, commercial property insurance, things of those nature. That's why we care. But as its impact to public health is also a concern to us. And so it's one of the reasons that we have been very interested in this, in the grant and our work with our partners at the Colorado Health Institute to really figure out how is climate change and these impacts to the world of insurance impacting the health of Coloradans, which impacts, again, not just their homeowners insurance, not just their property insurance, but is going to also impact health insurance down the road. And with that, I'll let my other panelist, Ann Roberson, introduce herself.
Hi, thank you, Vince. I'm Ann Roberson, and I'm the manager of the SC Safe Home Mitigation Grant Program located within the South Carolina Department of Insurance. The program was started in 2007, and it was really created as a result of the issues that we saw following Hurricane Katrina and those series of storms that really impacted the southern states. We saw issues regarding availability and affordability of insurance for homeowners throughout our state and other states as well. So our General Assembly passed legislation and created the SC Safe Home program. And since that point in time, we've awarded over 8,000 grants to homeowners in our coastal regions to help them strengthen and fortify their homes, primarily focusing on roof retrofits and opening protection, all again, wind-based for the most part. And we have awarded more than $34 million in assistance to homeowners. We have, over the last several years, seen homeowners kind of step back a little bit, just because I think they cannot afford their piece of the retrofit. And I think there are a lot of reasons for that. We are seeing some areas that seem to be more stressed than others. And when I say stressed, I mean stressed both financially and from personal standpoint and from climate change and issues. They're seeing more flash flooding. We're seeing more impacts from strong winds and those sorts of things. So we are very interested in trying to learn why this is, what can we do to help. And as our mission is to try to make our coastal areas more resilient, this is a paramount issue for us in trying to reach that goal.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you for that introduction. Let's turn it over to Thomas to tell us about what's happening in Louisiana.
I'm Tom Travis. I'm Deputy Commissioner at the Louisiana Department of Insurance for Policy, Innovation, and Research. And I'm also the director of the Louisiana Fortified Homes Program, which is a grant program similar to what Alabama has to help people put on fortified roofs on single-family homes. Of course, our target audience in this project is to help underserved people, with resilient construction, making their homes more survivable, if you will, during hurricanes or named storms, other adverse weather events. And of course, the public health is probably, getting into this, public health is a secondary concern or issue, but it's a very real one, because the adverse effects on public health affect things like our ability to recover from a named storm or hurricane, and the ability of the workforce, to get back to work and to bring everybody back online, and to bring us back to normal. And of course, from the insurance perspective, our department is responsible for regulating insurance. We regulate the rates of insurance. So we're also a consumer protection agency. We're trying to help people with their insurance costs. Of course, your average household doesn't have a professional risk manager. And so part of what we're doing in this program is really a type of loss prevention, and trying to help them survive and maintain their homes and make it more insurable.
All right. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for that introduction. Let's turn it back to Brian to hear what's happening in Alabama.
I'm Brian Powell with the Alabama Department of Insurance. I serve as the Deputy Commissioner and also the Director of a new operation here, the Office of Risk and Resilience. In response to your question, I think it's all interrelated. Changing climate presents a fundamental threat to human health. Human health can be directly affected by the availability and affordability of insurance. And I think that insurance is directly affected by changes in the climate. I think that there are negative impacts of this interrelationship creates adverse effects on things like workforce and infrastructure. The more frequent and severe weather events are, the more negative impact we experience between these relationships. Change in climate is also degrading, I think, to many of our social determinants for, like, say, good health, such as ability to work, in some instances, equality, and access to health care to our most vulnerable populations. I like to take into consideration climate stressors that affect, like, let's say, the lifespan of disease. Temperature, precipitation, both play a role in the increase in the disease that directly affect the health and insurance.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Thank you for that introduction to what's happening to strengthen Alabama homes. Karam, why don't you end us up here with your introduction of what's happening in Colorado?
Sure. So my name is Karam Ahmad. I'm a director at the Colorado Health Institute. I direct our Acclimate Colorado body of work, which is our work that is centered on the intersection of climate change and health and communities, and really making sure that we are supporting communities in their ability to adapt and be resilient and live happy, healthy lives in the face of a warming climate here in Colorado. Our organization, Colorado Health Institute, we've been around for over 20 years now. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan research and consulting group and convening group. We do a lot of convening of different government agencies and partners across health, across environment, across all sorts of facets that impact the health and well-being of Coloradans. Why climate change, public health, and insurance are important to me and important to CHI. So we know climate change, it's happening now. It's impacting the health and well-being of Coloradans and folks across the country already, and some more than others. And it's those populations, those some more than others, that we really are concerned about and are really thinking about what are the best ways that we can come up with solutions to protect them. Insurance is one of many levers. We know that the insurance industry in general has been thinking about the impacts of climate change for decades. In many ways, we're on the vanguard in terms of thinking through how to prepare for climate change. And the intersection of insurance, it's very important to us here in Colorado. We had the Marshall Fire. I'm sure Vince here from Colorado also shared a bit about the Marshall Fire here in Colorado, which was the most destructive wildfire in Colorado history, burned over 1,000 homes and caused a lot of irreparable damage in a community in a matter of hours, and in a community that was, you would think, is not the typical wildfire prone community. So why this matters is because insurance is one of the levers that can be used to protect the property and in doing so the health and well-being of communities. And in our work, we're coordinating with the Division of Insurance here in Colorado to really think through what do wildfires really look like in Colorado? How do we contextualize it so this isn't an issue where people think it's happening in the mountains. It just happens out in nature, and it's not going to impact people. Wildfires have impacted all 64 counties in our country since the early 1990s. So it's touched every speck of the state in one way or another. So coordinating with the Division of Insurance and coordinating with other state agencies, local public health systems, academia, it's going to be a very sort of cross-sector effort that's going to be necessary to protect the health and well-being of communities, and insurance plays a key part in that.
All right. Well, thank you all for those introductions. So why don't we start off with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation research. So all of your states and all of the efforts that you're currently working on have received research funding from the foundation. So tell us a little bit about that research. Who's your target audience? What do you want to learn from them? Give us a little bit more about what you're working on. Vince, you want to start us off?
Sure, thanks. So we are working with the Colorado Health Institute on a program to study the effects of climate change and its impact on the health of Coloradans, and what we can do to hopefully make things better, especially for vulnerable populations, to lessen those negative health impacts. It's been challenging, but yeah, I'm glad we are working with the Colorado Health Institute, because one of the keys, I think, in working with a group like them is being familiar with their work and working with a well-respected organization. And here in Colorado, they are very well respected with the work they do that has traditionally always been focused on healthcare, health insurance, and how the people of Colorado are doing. This was, I think, a different creature for them. They came to us needing to learn more about property insurance, homeowners insurance, which wasn't their space. we talked a lot about homeowners insurance, about wildfires, about mitigation, about the secondary impacts of wildfires, smoke damage to homes, and things of that nature. But it's been good for us because in the division of insurance, we tend to look at the world of insurance in a very insurance sort of way. And very often in a very sort of binary way of, okay, here's the world of health and life insurance, and here's property and casualty insurance. Of course, we know that wildfires impact people's health, but actually connecting those dots is something that we hadn't done or hadn't necessarily thought about. We tend to think about things in terms of the insurance plans, the homeowners plans, the health insurance plans, what's covered, what isn't, claims, those sort of things, but not putting those dots together with putting those dots together was something we hadn't really done. So this work is really focused on that. And the team at CHI has been great. They learned very quickly all of the ins and outs of property insurance and all of the things that it meant and the impacts of that. I'd say one of the big drivers for them as well, in terms of undertaking this project was the Marshall Fire back in December 2021. This was a large fire in Boulder County that really took place over the course of about 24 hours and did extensive damage to a couple of communities there, with nearly 1,000 homes lost. It's been a wake-up call for much of the state, not just in terms of insurance, but in terms of community planning, community resilience, rebuilding efforts, and then the long-term impacts to people's physical health, to their mental health, to their financial well-being, to the health of those communities, losing their tax base, losing the people that live there, and all of the challenges going on with that. And it's one of the things that clearly this was something that was brought on by climate change. This was December 30th, 2021. We had already been in cold weather season, October, November, almost all of December, without any snow in the Denver, Boulder area, without any rain. And so the area was just dry. And the other real, I think, shocking thing about this fire in particular was it took place in a suburban community. This wasn't in the pine forest in the Colorado mountains, which, unfortunate as those wildfires are, tend to be regular occurrences. They often they'll burn. They won't cause any damage to homes or minimal damage. This was something that just swept through a community with the green space areas that people appreciate in those areas, just going up in minutes and in hours and engulfing the community. So that's been a game changer for us here in Colorado. It's changed the way we've been thinking about insurance, homeowners insurance, the impact to people. It's been a game changer for the people of the state and for the organizations looking at this. I think our target audience, when we think of this report, and it's a very detailed report. Initial drafts are looking great. They really try and figure out the different areas of the state and point out that so many of the areas are under some risk of wildfire. And I would say that in the larger sense, our target audience has been or is going to be almost all homeowners and people in Colorado, anybody impacted by these fires, really. But I think the immediate target audience is going to be the decision makers, the policy makers, legislators, key stakeholders, to figure out what can be done and what are the next steps. And I think one of the real positives in working with an organization like CHI is that they are thinking beyond just this report and thinking what those next steps are. They want to drive policy discussions to improve the lives and the health of Coloradans, which is something we are completely aligned with them on. And so I think that's something that is going to be key in terms of driving those policy discussions. I think that also highlights what we're hoping to learn from this is I think It helps to quantify the information. I think a lot of the information is not necessarily going to be surprising that comes out of the report. Putting it all together is going to be useful, but I think it's that next step of what are the discussions, what are the policy decisions, policy discussions that come next that we can hopefully drive to make things better for folks. That's really where we're hoping a lot of bang for the buck comes.
So thank you for that, Vince. Obviously the dry conditions there in Colorado present really unique factors. The idea that we're looking at suburban fires in Colorado is just kind of unfathomable. So why don't we build the bridge from you as an insurance regulator to the public health perspective, and why don't we bring in Karam here to bring in his perspective on the Colorado Health Institute with respect to the research. So Karam, what do you think in terms of the target audience for this research, and what do you want to learn from them?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, like our target audience, there's a couple bins, right? There are folks that are working in the insurance industry, right? There are folks that are working really in the division of insurance and the state agencies that are involved in all things related to insurance, policymakers that are working in coordination with the division of insurance to put forth legislation and put forth potential programs, policies, budgets that can be used towards protecting the health and well-being of Coloradans from wildfires. I would say those are sort of key audiences. Of course, other audiences that are important are homeowners, are the renters, are local government officials. This is wildfires and just climate change in general. It is a global issue with very localized risk, and the work cannot be done without coordination with local government officials, community-based organizations that are doing a lot of the work on the ground. And then, like I said, insurance providers and officials and the policymakers that work hand in hand with them. I think actually the next phase of our work. So we just finished our first phase of our work, which was really analytical. We were trying to really understand what is the landscape of sort of wildfires and how they impact some of the more sensitive or vulnerable populations or at-risk populations in Colorado. And we're about to release a report that explains that and tells a story of 5 different communities across the state of Colorado and how wildfires can look different depending on where you put a dot on the map in our state. But this next phase of our work is really getting at exactly what your question is. So it is involved in sort of engaging with community partners, engaging with homeowners, with renters, with local government officials, and with folks that are representative of the insurance industry as well, to really understand we're trying to understand what is the nexus of need from community in terms of what are the things that they need to ensure that they are protected and don't have protection gaps in their insurance needs. And then also realistically, what can insurance providers provide as products, as solutions, as education, as outreach, without going insolvent, right? Like there's this fine balance of towing or of tiptoeing between that, and threading that needle is really what we're trying to at least start to understand and help convene and put some thoughts together for all of those groups that are impacted.
Thank you for that. It's really interesting hearing about the circumstances that Colorado finds itself in with regards to dry conditions. The idea that, or the notion that we would be seeing suburban fires in Colorado is just unfathomable. Why don't we switch gears here and turn to Ann? Ann, I've had the opportunity of learning a little bit more about the South Carolina Safe Home Program. Excited to hear you talk about it. Tell us about your target audience and what do you want to learn from them with respect to this research?
Sure. Well, I will say we seem to be dealing with a lot of water, a little bit different from what Vince might have been dealing with there. But we have had a slower uptake in our coastal regions of both flood insurance and homeowners insurance. And as I referenced earlier, we have seen a little bit of a slowdown in our grant uptake as far as homeowners in some of those more vulnerable populations. We really want to know why and what's the reasoning behind that. So we have had the opportunity to partner with our South Carolina Office of Resilience and apply for the Robert Wood Johnson funding and receive it. The title of our grant project is Root Causes of Protection Gaps in Homeowners and Flood Insurance Coverage among the Vulnerable Residents Living in the PD and Santee Watersheds. And I will tell you, if anyone's familiar with South Carolina, the PD and Santee Watersheds are just off of Myrtle Beach, Georgetown coastal areas. And we get water from the coast, obviously, but we also get whatever comes down from North Carolina. So when North Carolina gets severe storms, we will likely get the flooding, and residual effects. May not be immediate, but it will come. And unfortunately, a lot of those homeowners in those areas are suffering. They have been hit repeatedly, beginning as far back as 2015. Some of them still have not recovered from the 1,000-year flood that we had in 2015. So we're wanting to know obviously there are impacts. So we're wanting to know more about those impacts. What health concerns are we seeing? People living in situations that have not been repaired for several years. I'm sure they have mold. What else do they have? How what kind of impacts have they had to deal with, and are they still dealing with? So we're working with the Coastal Carolina University and the RISE Center there, and a strong team of local residents and community leaders to get out and really speak to these homeowners and residents in the areas to find out more. We've got a survey that we started. It's about 33 questions. Sounds pretty extensive, and it is. It asks all sorts of things. What kind of home are you presently in? How long have you had damage, or do you have damage? Do you have a flood insurance policy? Do you have a homeowner's? If you don't, what would it take to get one? All of those sorts of questions, just to try to get a better sense of what's going on there in those areas. As far as our target audience for this report, once it's complete, I tend to agree with Vince. I think it's going to be policymakers, obviously homeowners. One of the questions we're hearing a lot is that they think they have a good understanding of insurance and what it does, but they still have a lot of questions, and they don't understand what the deductible is. So, I mean, that's kind of a marker there to say that maybe we need to get in there and do some more education and outreach, awareness, not, just to make them understand and see what we can do to try to help them. Going forward, I think it's going to take probably some out of the box kind of thinking. How are we going to help some of these more vulnerable populations be able to have the coverages that they need to get them to the point where they can be more resilient. In a perfect world, I'd love to see every one of those homes mitigated and resilient and ready to go, and all of them to have homeowners and flood insurance. That's a pretty big wish, but it's something that we're working toward, and I really hope that we can get closer to that goal.
So that was an important point that you just raised there, Anne, at the end. I want to put this back out there to you in terms of how we think about resilience. Is it enough to have homeowners insurance, flood insurance? Is that enough? Or are we asking people in our homes to take action today, to take advantage of the administered through the South Carolina Safe Homes program? How do you think about resilience in that context? What is enough?
Well, I really think it's going to require a multi-pronged approach to this. We've all got stake in this. It's not just the grant. The grant is obviously going to help. When it was first created, this grant program was seen as seed money to help build a mitigation message for the homeowner. There is an inspection report that goes into great detail about what needs to be done to make their home completely, or stronger and more safe, that they get to keep as a part of the grant program. So we're hoping that they will want to go ahead and take additional steps. Once they get the grant, then they'll work towards something else. But in order to get to that point, I think there is a responsibility there on the homeowner to understand and appreciate what it is we're trying to do. It's just not a free roof program. And that's part of what we do with the Safe Home program, is the awareness and making them understand the importance of why we're doing this. I think it's important also for the homeowner to be prepared. And when I say prepared, I don't just mean having that go kit. I mean, they've really got to understand their insurance policies. They need to understand what it is that they have, what's covered, what's not covered. So many people do not have emergency funds in place to be able to help. We have a catastrophe savings account option here in the state that allows people to set money aside for their deductible. We also have state income tax credits to allow them to save on their income tax if they fortify and mitigate their home to safe home standards. So all of these pieces play into this. But I think at the root of all of it is the importance of that homeowner understanding what it's going to take to make them be able to be to that point and get to that point. And it's, I think it involves a financial awareness and a literacy component. At least I think it does here in our state. And I don't think I'm really speaking out for, I think it's probably true in other states as well. So we're hoping to learn more from these surveys as to what is it that they value and how can we make that, something that equals to what they need to have as far as the coverages and the resilience piece as well.
Thank you for that, Ann. So why don't we take that and move from the water issues that climate is posing in South Carolina and move to fire in Colorado. Vince, what's your perspective here? Same question.
Yeah, well, one, I think Ann is absolutely right that it's about insurance literacy. So much of what we deal with when as regulators here at the Division of Insurance is about insurance literacy, understanding what it is, what the terminology is, what's covered, what isn't covered. One of the lessons coming out of the Marshall Fire back in December 2021 was how many people had or how many people were underinsured. And I think some of that is going to be down to how are the policies sold to them? How did insurance agents represent policies to these people? But I think there's an idea, especially with homeowners insurance, that it's something you just set it and forget it. It's unlike health insurance. Health insurance, we have open enrollment come around every year. Whether you're in the individual market or you have an employer-based plan, you're getting information about that, starting at the end of the year saying, hey, it's time to change. That renewal notice for your homeowner's insurance, even for your auto insurance, comes in via an email or a letter, and it might sit in your inbox, sit at the end of your desk for a while, you open it. It's not too bad, you just let it go forward, but you don't dig into the details. And so I think there's, like Ann said, there is some level of responsibility for people to be familiar with their policy, know what's in there, know what's covered, what's not covered, and to do it at a time when things are relatively calm. In the midst of a disaster or even after a disaster is not the time to start figuring out that you don't have the insurance that you thought you did and that you aren't going to have enough to build your home, which is what many folks here in that fire discovered is they were underinsured to some extent. And so I think it's something that we're hoping can drive the discussion. But I think something else you asked of Ann is insurance enough? Is homeowners insurance enough? It's a vital piece. But things like home hardening, I think that's an excellent approach. It's something we want to take a look at the programs in other states. Wildfire mitigation is something that many of the homeowners insurance companies selling here in Colorado are requiring of homeowners who live in the mountains or in what is called the wildland urban interface, or WUI. So kind of the foothills of Colorado. But I think it's just going to become more prevalent. And it's something that, going beyond homeowners insurance, it's something that speaks to the resilience of communities. It's more than homeowners insurance that needs to build back these communities. When something happens that is disastrous on a large scale to a community, they lose infrastructure. As I said earlier, they're going to lose the tax base of their homeowners, of the commercial interests in the community. And so these are things that are that need to be thought about, need to be looked at, and need to be addressed. And these issues being driven by climate change, like wildfires, are causing the homeowners insurance companies to, let's say, reevaluate their approach to it. We're not only seeing it here, we're seeing it in many places around the country where they're starting to, let's say, be more careful with their underwriting, be more selective in where they write policies. Here in Colorado, just coming out of that fire, one legislative approach that was passed is the introduction of a FAIR plan, an insurer of last resort. We hope to have that up and have plans available in early 2025. We don't necessarily have an availability problem now, but we want to get that going in case we do, because we are hearing, that insurance companies are, again, being a little more careful about what they're doing. We want to take a look at the impact of all of this on reconstruction costs, because that's something that, again, in light of this, that disaster, was something that a lot of people didn't know about, and it was hard to gauge. So those are things we want to take a look at as well.
Insurance is one of the pieces of the puzzle, right? It is one lever. It is one factor that can contribute to the resilience of a family's ability to, in the face of a wildfire or a flood or whatever natural disaster may occur. Insurance is something that can help them rebuild and recover, right? And that's important in terms of resilience. But again, it is one factor. A person or a family or an individual's sort of ability to be resilient also has to factor in sort of the local community's resilience, right? Does the local community have the resources to provide in the event of a natural disaster? Do they have the resources to provide to support that community, whether they're economic resources or food, social factors that influence people's health, temporary housing, things like that? Insurance is one piece of that, and it helps in the sort of especially in the recovery and post natural disaster factor. And we know that insurance providers are trying to be more proactive as well in providing education and resources related to prevention. Here in Colorado, again, we're focused on wildfires, so a lot of that is geared towards like wildfire proofing your home and doing things like that to take those steps. But insurance is one important key factor in terms of resilience, but it is really ensuring that communities, individuals, families have the social factors they need to sort of protect their health and to be resilient. And that's a discussion beyond even just climate change in general. That's work that we also work on at CHI, is making sure that people are connected to the resources that allow them to live happy, healthy lives. So that can be healthcare, can be food, can be housing, can be access to good paying jobs. All those sorts of things are really at the heart of it, that's how you ensure a community, a family, or individual are resilient to natural disasters. So I would say I would caution binary thinking, not either or thinking. I would say the sort of spectrum of climate adaptation and resilience, right, is from prevention to recovery and the sort of after effects of recovery. Insurance is really a factor that can play a role throughout that spectrum, but is mostly thought of in recovery. And communities obviously should be doing as much as they can to act to prevent. If you're living in a wildfire prone area, for example, wildproof your home. It's statistically shown to protect your property. And then insurance on the other end can be used as a protective factor. So depending on where you are contextually, it's that balance of action versus insurance, I think, will take place. And it's important to factor that in and not really think of it as one way or the other.
Well, thank you for that. All right, so let's turn to Alabama. Brian, why don't you tell us about the Strengthen Alabama Homes program? Specifically, as we think about the research, who is your target audience, and what do you want to learn from them?
Well, thinking about a target market or our target market, which are residents of communities of color in Alabama, they are perhaps some of the most economically challenged citizens that we have. It's not enough to have insurance. Insurance is typically a family's first line of economic recovery after a disaster. Depending on the amount and type of insurance, the loss may surpass coverage in many ways. I think that helping families understand the role that insurance plays in their life and how to make better decisions about lifestyle and exposure to risk has a direct tie to the resilience of the household. All is important, and the trade-off is to have a more informed or educated consumer who can make better decisions, coupled with adequate insurance coverage to create that more resilient household. I don't think that it's enough to have insurance, and especially just to prepare them or help prepare them from a looming climate emergency. I think as was mentioned before, that Alabama has a mitigation program called Strengthen Alabama Homes that provides grants to roof homes to the IBHS fortified standard. So having insurance and taking action, let's say in this particular instance where we've fortified a home, I think that's enough to perhaps keep you safe to a certain degree, and then also perhaps get you in a position so that you can financially recover, hopefully faster after the storm. But there are so many other things that go into the term resilience that needs to be considered. Educating people, I think, on how to make better life choices is a much broader scope and bigger picture than just helping them get through the storm. I think that if they are educated and can make better life decisions, that once the storm passes, that even increases the time it decreases the time that it takes to recover in all ways affected after a climate emergency. I think insurance is really preparing you for after the event. Perhaps action can prepare you for the event. In other words, it can do something prior. Just like I mentioned earlier with the Strengthen Alabama Homes program, that action prepares you for a severe weather event to happen. Insurance is part of the recovery process after the storm passes or after you have some type of tragic event. So I think they work hand in hand. They're both important, but I think action is really in the way we're using it here is a way that you can prepare, and then insurance is more of a way for recovery.
All right, thank you for that, Brian. Now let's shift from Alabama to Louisiana. Thomas, why don't you tell us about the Louisiana Fortified Homes program, the research that you're doing through the support of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation? Who is your target audience, and what do you want to learn from them?
our target audience is underserved populations in the areas most vulnerable to hurricanes and named storms. Of course, in doing our research for our Robert Wood Johnson grant, Smart Home America identified 5 target communities to focus their efforts, and they were all in South Louisiana, and they were all in densely populated areas where there's a lot of poverty and a lot of underserved communities, concentrations of underserved communities. I think what we would like to learn is what are the barriers to their having insurance. Because we're an insurance-focused agency, of course. Of course, we're in doing this grant program, we're learning some of that. One thing is the cost of people can't afford the insurance. People can't afford to maintain flood insurance, even with the federally subsidized rates. And just to do things like putting a new roof on the house to make the house more insurable, even with a grant, a lot of people can't come up with $5,000 or $10,000. Even fairly middle-class people are having a hard time coming up with $5,000 or $10,000 to re-roof their homes, even though it's going to benefit them with substantial discounts over the next several years. So I think what we want to know why or what we can do to help people with those issues. And then also, of course, it's a public health oriented things. We'd like to find out from them what it is that, what are the adverse effects that they have from maybe living in substandard housing or from being affected by named storms. So, when they're forced out of their homes are degraded, the roof's damaged, the house is damaged, they've lost electricity, things like that. Or when you look at resilience, it's not enough to have insurance. That insurance is the risk management of last resort. That they come in and make a payment. But it's a long process and it's a frustrating process. And what do people do in the interim? And it's very difficult for them to rely on emergency assistance, which may also be very slow. It's better to help families prepare for problems like hurricanes or other types of storms or climate-related disasters. It's better to keep them in their homes or get them back in their homes as soon as possible. Studies all show it minimizes the public health adverse effects when they're able to stay in their own homes and they're able to go back to work and to get their lives back to normal as soon as possible. And it's particularly most important things like stress, post-traumatic stress, but there's also other health issues. Part of it is people getting injured from cleanup and restoration work. So that's is a cascade of effects that can be cut off by keeping people in their homes by having resilient homes. The major trade-offs, first of all, action requires a commitment up front, and it requires resources, money, people, time, effort, which they may not want to do. As people are oriented towards these things after a major event, but as time goes on, people start to lose interest in maintaining these efforts that are required to do the resilience, to pay the taxes, and to make the other efforts to have a resilient home, a resilient community. Where sometimes, even though it costs money, insurance is easier in some respects because you get to go on with your life and you just write a check into the insurance company every month or quarter or whatever the premium period is. And but regardless, you're going to have to make the effort in one way or the other. And I think it's just a matter of, I think it's better to do the effort, take the action up front. It minimizes all the costs down the road, but it's hard to get people to maintain an interest in those sorts of things.
So now let's talk a little bit about the findings of the research that you're working on. I realize that you all are probably halfway in to your grant cycle, but I assume that you've got some things put into motion and you're starting to find some results, or you're making some observations. Tell us what you expect in terms of the findings from the research. Anne, you want to kick us off?
Sure, I'd be glad to. So we anticipate gathering about 400 responses to these surveys, and right now we're about 220. And we've also had a series of focus groups. I'm happy to say that some of the focus groups have had as many as 27 people attend. I think that's been tremendous, and I really attribute that to the fact that we've had local community leaders out there helping promote it. That brings that interest in. So it's an opportunity for them to get together and really talk and explain what's going on. Some of the people have brought in photographs of damage that they're having, that they have in their homes. So I think the response has been very, very good so far. We will continue to do our focus groups and finish up the surveys. We have sent those out and made them accessible via QR codes and links, and also paper surveys, just whatever we could to try to help, get that response back in. Our preliminary report will be ready hopefully in January, and then we've got to go back and do validations, and that'll be into the spring. So the final report will be obviously in the summer. But what we're seeing already with what the surveys that we have gotten in, that we've looked at preliminarily here, we see there are some culture barriers, truly. And as I said, we know that there's a vulnerable population there. Unfortunately, there's a general skepticism so far that we've seen of government assistance. And what does that mean? I get it. I can understand that, these folks, some of them have said, what, we've answered so many questions in so many surveys, please don't ask us anymore. And, hopefully, we're able to talk to those people a little bit more one-on-one and try to help them so that we can dispel some of those thoughts and theories there. But we are seeing a desire for education and awareness of insurance coverages and products and what's out there. So I think that's a great opportunity for us to get in there and try to explain that more. We do see that there is an inability to pay for some of these coverages, and that's what's holding some of them back. And we're also seeing to that health impact, we're seeing that there are just general feelings of stress and anxiety and mental health concerns about mold. All of this related to past events and those that are lying ahead in the future. So and we've actually had several people who were not aware of the Safe Home program show interest in it. So I think we've got a lot of work that we can do going forward. This is just an opportunity for us to really get out there and get to know the folks in those local communities.
So Vince, tell us about what you expect in terms of the findings from your research there in Colorado with the Colorado Health Institute.
I think one of the key things that we're hoping to get out of it, and looking at a draft of the report so far, is the discussion of the impact of wildfires and climate change as a whole across the state. I think, as I said earlier, the wildfires have tended to be focused in, the sort of mountain areas of Colorado. But as we're delving into the topic, and as CHI has dug into the topic, finding that it's a risk that occurs all across the state. So trying to find out what that is and what its health impacts have been. And that's the other thing I think that we're really hoping to get out of this, and that is connecting those ideas of wildfires and the impact on people's health. Like I said, we in the insurance regulatory space tend not to connect those directly. So putting those together is going to be very interesting, and has been interesting in terms of discussion and in the early versions of the report. I think the other thing we're really hoping to get at is what is the impact to Colorado's vulnerable populations, and socioeconomic factors, but also the less economic advantaged areas of the state. What does that mean? Because again, so much of the talk about wildfires and homeowners insurance has been focused on the mountain areas, but what does this mean for the Eastern Plains? The farms down in the southern part of our state, trying to figure this out. What is the impact, and then not just the impact, but then what are some steps that can be taken to help this? Our timing right now is I think the report is going to be done in the next couple of months, early part of 2024, with an eye on engaging in stakeholder discussions in conjunction with CHI to find out, to put out the results and hear back from the people of Colorado. And I think that's one of the other things that we're really keen on finding out. What is it that they have to say? What is it that they're feeling in terms of their experience these days with the threats coming down from climate change, and how is it impacting their lives? We're undertaking a bit of that kind of in the homeowners insurance space, just within the Division of Insurance, trying to find out what are their concerns now in this world. But I think the discussions that CHI is going to engage in once this report is out, focused on this report, we're very excited to hear what people have to say.
So Karam, anything you want to add to Vince's remarks there?
Yeah. So, I mean, what we've already uncovered, I think like I think the first thing that we uncovered was wildfires have impacted all 64 counties in Colorado. I think that was that dispels the sort of myth that wildfires only happen in nature, right? Or only happen in the mountains. I think a key goal of this work is to uncover some of those myths, is to do some storytelling with the data. We've got a lot of the data, and we've contextualized actually sort of what wildfires look like in 5 different communities across Colorado. And we've looked at sort of the landscape risk, we've looked at housing risk, we've looked at social demographic and sort of community resilience risk, and then sort of what is like the wildfire landscape in each of these communities. And we looked at a community that's sort of like high mountain, hard to reach, a community that it's difficult to like have people evacuate. This is in sort of the Estes Park area of Colorado, for example. And sort of the story there shows us that it's an older adult population. There's sort of some of the demographic factors we have to think about. The homes in that community are typically not wildproof. They're older. That puts them more at risk. Whereas we look at another community, for example, on the Eastern Plains, and a lot of people in Colorado wouldn't associate the Eastern Plains with wildfire risk, but these are grasslands. There's really high wind risk. A lot of communities out there, and in fact, 100% of communities out there are at risk of being affected by a wildfire in the next 30 years in one form or another. Most of those areas are in wildland-urban interfaces. Most of those communities on the Eastern Plains are lower income, are not equipped to sort of have the factors that can make them resilient in the face of a natural disaster like a wildfire. So what we've started to uncover, and of course this is like we're sort of peeling the layers of this, but what we've started to uncover and we've put together in this first report is really wildfires look different depending on the community that you're looking at. And sort of the wildfire factors, the socio-demographic factors, the resilience factors for a community, the housing factors are really going to paint and are painting a different picture in each of those communities. That's 2 really quick examples.
Brian, what about Alabama? What do you expect in terms of the findings from the research from the perspectives of Alabama?
We expect to find that the economically challenged citizens who achieved like a basic level of knowledge about insurance, we should see an uptick in their understanding about how to create a more resilient life. This can be measured by seeing better choices made by them, and also by becoming better insured.
Thank you for that. Thomas, from Louisiana's perspective, What do you expect in terms of the findings from the research?
Well, I think one of the things we're going to find is that is usual when you do research, that you're probably going to discover something that you didn't expect to find. But I think that generally what we're hoping to discover is to learn, at least from in our study, looking at public health effects from housing related issues, and how we can mitigate those public health effects through making homes more resilient, making them more insurable, and making people enabling people to stay in their homes or to return to their homes shortly after an adverse event. And we're probably going to learn a lot about the economic and social barriers to people being able to do that. After some of the major events we've had, sometimes people they're able to go back to their communities and get to work very quickly. With other events like Katrina and Rita, we had large areas of destruction across the entire state. It was sometimes months before people could even get back to their houses to start to work on reconstruction. So I think we'll learn a lot about social factors that affect public health and insurability.
All right, so as we wrap up this great panel, this great conversation, I just want to come back to where we started, which is that the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation really put out resources to support all this different research that you all are doing on climate change, vulnerabilities, insurance, public health in your respective states. Let's say they come back to you after this project. You all have had different successes, great successes on the research. You are putting that research to work in your communities to increase the resilience of your communities. If they asked you what are some ideas for project number 2 in your respective states, what would you say if there were future research that you wanted to pursue? Anne, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Gosh, that would be absolutely wonderful. I would really love to see us partner with other state agencies and organizations throughout the area, state, and region to actually implement an awareness mitigation and resiliency initiative and be able to track it. Try doing it for about a year and a half or so, and have a limited number of people that could be in there, and let's really see what we can do. Make those efforts to bring them on board and align them with the coverages that they need and understand it and get to where they can afford it, and also then mitigate those homes, and let's see what we can do, because I think that would just be a wonderful way to send this message out. It could be a great model for the rest of the state, honestly, and anyone else. So that would be my hope.
Excellent. So monitoring and evaluation following on the project to show that the impact is happening, or to track that impact. That's great. That's a great follow-on research. Brian, what about you in Alabama?
If we were able to receive some additional funding in the state, one of the things I think the Department of Insurance would be extremely interested in understanding is taking into account the mitigation work that we're doing with the Fortified program and the Strengthen Alabama Homes program. What kind of positive health effect is that having? We're able to mitigate homes and keep people in these homes during the storms, make them safer, create better living conditions for them, better economic conditions for them, just through the mitigation piece alone. What is that ripple effect? How does that look when you start talking about health impact of families, especially in maybe low-income communities or communities of color, especially in our most rural areas in Alabama? What does that look like? What can we see from research so that we can take that information and maybe use it in other areas of state government, like such as our Alabama Resilience Council? There are projects that we want to take on there, but we need some background information so we understand what we're faced with.
Thank you for that, Brian. Vince, what about you? Any future research opportunities for you there in Colorado?
Yeah, I don't want to say necessarily I was copying in, but I'm thinking that resiliency and mitigation are big things. I think something we'd love to dig into is the safe home or home hardening um, discussions, projects, to figure out more about those, to learn more about those. But I think there's also a space for what does community resilience look like? I think so much of this gets focused on individual homeowners, individual people. What did you do to, do you have homeowners insurance? What did you do to mitigate your property? And I think back to what somebody told me once when we were talking about mitigation and wildfires is it's all well and good if I've done it, but if my neighbor hasn't done it, it doesn't matter a whole lot. And I think it's one of those things that needs to be looked at to have a larger discussion about what can communities do to become more resilient in the face of wildfire and these other climate change driven disasters.
Excellent. So community resilience. So let's build from that, Karam, with your public health hat on. What would be additional areas of research that you'd like to work on with Vince?
Yeah. So I think this was a really this phase of the work was a really good first step in us really assessing what wildfire risk looks like in Colorado. Of course, we have a lot of climate scientists in Colorado. I'm sure we have like the most per capita in the country that are looking at wildfire risk and the impact on communities. I think where it would be really helpful in a next step is not just taking the findings of understanding risk, the intersection of community, social factors, and the influence on health. And then, I mean, our next phase of our work is sort of talking to the communities, talking to the stakeholders in terms of what they would like to see in terms of solutions. I think another phase of this work can really be to dive into the sort of health impacts and really like localizing what it means to come up with solutions for communities here in Colorado. Like I said, wildfires are a risk that can and have impacted the entire state of Colorado in many different ways. I think a next step for this work is to really dive a little deeper into sort of those social factors. We often call them the social determinants of health. That's the term that Robert Wood Johnson uses. And really, like, is there a better way that we can kind of start to uncover that intersection of health and kind of the intersection of insurance as a lever to protect those communities? We've started to do that in this process this year. And I think, I mean, if you were to really ask me the kinds of data that we would love to see, it's more claims data from hospitals, for example, would allow us to really understand what are the health outcomes in communities from all of these natural disasters, and how do we sort of map that out with sort of insurance gaps in our state as well. There are so many factors that can be sort of assessed. So yeah, I think there are a lot of opportunities for further research in the intersection, especially of health and insurance and local community health outcomes.
All right, thanks for that. So let's wrap up with Thomas in Louisiana. Thomas, if you were looking at future areas of research and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation came back to you and said, great job here, what would you be wanting to look at for future research?
I think that right now we're still trying to learn what it is we don't know. I guess, the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns. I think, though, that if they were interested in funding more research, that we would certainly want to find how we can affect people's decision making. What are the buttons to push to make people take action? Whether you the nudges, the social influences. How do you get people to make the correct decisions? How do you get people to maintain their homes and to upgrade them? How do you get people to prepare for events? Because it's not just having the home that's in good shape. You also have to be prepared to sustain yourself for 3 to 5 days after an event. a lot of people don't evacuate because they don't have the money to go anywhere. I think we should look at ways that we can influence the whole spectrum of resilience, and find ways. Of course, they're public health oriented. How does that affect public health, and what are the public health benefits that we get from that in order to justify those efforts?
Why don't we thank our panelists for being with us here this afternoon at the third annual Connecticut Conference on Climate Change and Insurance. This was the session on empowering communities with state grants for resilience. And we heard quite a bit in terms of how a foundation can provide support to states to conduct a variety of research. I mean, we heard a lot of different uses of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Fund grants to our various state leaders working through these different issues. So want to thank Kimberly and the foundation for their support of not only these states, but also the state of Connecticut. We also were a recipient of one of these grants to support a project that we're implementing here in Connecticut called Climate Smart Technologies and Home Medical Devices for Affordable Housing. So we are also looking at how to improve the resilience of our vulnerable communities to the impacts of climate, but specifically through a technology lens. What kind of technologies can we help deploy to make them more resilient when the power is out, to make sure that they are in comfortable temperatures when the weather is out of whack. But want to thank all of you for being with us here today. Thank all of our panelists. Good luck with turning that research into practical and pragmatic results to increase the resilience of our communities. And again, thank you to the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation for your support. Thank you all for being with us here today at this panel.